But we'll have a look at her next after Ahab. So Ahab, if you look back in 1 Kings chapter 16, it's when he first gets mentioned. And his name means friend of the father. And he is the son of Omri. And what is interesting is that Omri means merchandise. And if you do a study on that word, you can actually see that in Deuteronomy 24:7, it says, if a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel and make merchandise of him or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you. That's the first time that you read the word merchandise in the Bible. And so it's interesting because Ahab, who is the friend of his father, so he obviously has a similar personality, he actually makes merchandise of Israel. He sells them out. Does that sound familiar? He sells out God's church by combining it with the world. And so we have an Ahab who is then leading God's people. And it says, but there was none like unto Ahab, which did sell himself. Notice the merchandise bit again. To work wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel, his wife, stirred up. So who was really behind it all was Jezebel, but he was the actor. Wow. He was the one that was doing it. Yeah. But once again, it's the sight of the Lord. Where is God's sight? It's in his eyes. It's in his face. He had something between his face and God's face. His logic was not God's logic. He was willing to sell himself and sell the nation. Wow. And he did very abominably in following idols, according to all the things as did the Amorites. Now, this is a very, when I read that, I went, oh, the Amorites. Because in Genesis chapter 15, verse 16, it says, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel, at the end of 1 Kings 21 there. In Genesis 15:16, he was talking to Abraham about the return of Israel to the promised land. And he says, but in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. It was when the iniquity of the Amorites was full that they were allowed to go back to Canaan to claim that land. And so it's interesting that it mentions the Amorites and the sins of the Amorites in conjunction with Ahab. So when the world was at its darkest period, it was the most sinful, the cup of iniquity was full. So it speaks symbolically. Ahab was joining with the same spirit with the world. Does that not sound familiar? We would be seeing the wickedness of the nations being the greatest that it has ever been, and the leader of the church joining with the world, if we're looking for modern day application. Revelation.
This is huge.
Revelation.
This is huge.
Revelation 14.
I'll let you finish. Go ahead. Finish that thought, and I want to add something to this.
Yeah, so Revelation 14:15, once again, talking about the end of the world, it says, thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time has come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So God is looking at, not just is God's people ready, but also whether Satan's people are ripe in the sense that their cup of iniquity is so full, it just cannot go on any longer. Okay, I'm going to hand over to you.
No, I won't say much because I want you to keep going. The wife, Jezebel, stirred this up. So it wasn't just Ahab wasn't a bad guy. It was Jezebel stirring this up. When you study this further, it's almost like she cooked it up. This was her plan. She had all the ingredients to put this meal together, but Ahab was the one who went to serve it. So, and the thing about Jezebel, she was able to play both sides of the spectrum. She was supposedly like appealing to Baal worship, of course. The word Jezebel came from the god of the Zidonians, Baal. I know yes. I'm not trying to spoil it for you, but the thing is, she was a Baal worshiper, but she was also citing herself as if she was for Israel at the same time. So she was bringing idolatrous practices of Baal worship into the camps of Israel. So she was able to be a perfect fit. And that's why he fell for this. Because he's not like Ahab was a bad guy. It's that his wife
Yes.
was corrupt. So the issue is very parallel here is we can have good men getting corrupted by idolatrous Jezebel, like the prophetic Jezebel of Revelation 17, this whore of Babylon is looking to build relationship with some of God's faithful servants to bring about similar corruptions as well. It's a scary
That's right.
idea, but prophetically speaking, that's kind of what's going on in the text.
It is exactly what is going on. And the fact that she remains hidden behind the scenes is actually a really significant thing. Let's continue on with Ahab. So as you said, Ahab marries Jezebel, the daughter of the Phoenician, or Zidonians king, Ethbaal. And Ethbaal, his name means with God or near God. And he did more evil than any of his fathers before him. So this is Ahab. He was a wicked, wicked, wicked man. I mean, we don't really get the full detail of what he did, clearly. And obviously served and worshipped Baal, reared up altars unto Baal, made a grove to Baal, which is actually nature worship and pantheism, climate action and climate change stuff is what we actually find its roots in pantheism, it's nature worship. And so we actually see that in some of our statements as well, where we're trying to save the planet because, we need to have sustainable development goals to ensure that we still have our trees because we're going to live forever on this earth. And the other thing was he forsook God's commandments. Now, the word there is not just the 10 commandments, it's actually the statutes as well. The statutes in the Torah, and actually the statutes right throughout the Bible, even in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is actually introducing statutes. Statutes are really the way that God gives us direction around how to apply the 10 commandments in principle. And so he forsook all of them in there. So if I was to summarize Ahab, he represents God's leading people who unite with the world to seek personal gain at the expense of God and his people before entering the promised land, because it was the bit about Assyria was mentioned there. But it's interesting, I do want to mention this because Ahab actually allows the meeting at Mount Carmel and he turns up. So there is something still at least virtuous around Ahab. I'm not saying he was a virtuous man, but there's still a little bit of spark of, okay, I'm going to allow the showdown to happen. He could have actually said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm digging my heels in. Now, I think the thing is, he was so desperate for the rain that he finally gave in, but he didn't want God. He just wanted the blessings, the rain. Now, I'm hoping that in the application to our church, that we don't have leaders who are just like Ahab, who come up to Mount Carmel, so to speak, to have the showdown between God and the God of the world and God of the Bible. And all they want is the blessings of the latter rain. They just want the power. I hope that they come and they want the life transforming aspects of that power. And I've shared this passage from Ellen White before, but I think it's worth reiterating. It says, the apostasy prevailing today is similar to that which in the prophet's day overspread Israel in the exaltation of the human above the divine, in the praise of popular leaders, in the worship of mammon, and in the placing of teachings of science above the truths of revelation, so the science of salvation. Multitudes today are following after Baal. So it's not just Ahab who was doing it. In fact, all Israel was doing it. And that's the reality. We need to actually acknowledge that there are possibly parts in our lives that we've not yet surrendered to the Lord where we are following after Baal and not willingly and not wittingly, but we may not be fully united with God. I know there's things in our lives, in my family's life, since being involved in the SDA Pearl movement and going around saying sola scriptura, that I've come to realize this is not in harmony with God and his word. I need to actually change these things.